Hi everyone, it's the Gossip Guy, and at this point you're probably aware that Hedera Hashgraph has and is providing a token offering. Now while the token provides an obvious economic utility to the platform overall, there still remains some questions and areas of clarification amongst the community regarding the token and its distribution. So in order to gather further insights into this, I had the opportunity once again to sit down with Tom Trowbridge, the president of Hedera Hashgraph, to learn more about the token's role in providing security to the platform, token supply and distribution, and the role of the Hedera Hashgraph Council in relation to the token. I think you'll find this video to be helpful, so with all that said, let's dive in.
Yeah, listen, it's good to be here. We're excited to have launched the crowd sale. We've, in a couple days, we have well over 3,000 people who have registered who are interested, so that's very exciting. I think it is important to understand the role the token plays in our protocol. And I think first and foremost, it is security. And understanding that's critical because it also feeds into why we have a large amount in Treasury, which is 64%, and why we have a very slow release schedule, neither of which I think are common attributes of either other protocols or other projects even. And so if we think about first the use of the token, in a private network, it's one node, one vote for a protocol like ours. When we go to a public ledger, you can't have it be one node, one vote, because someone could stand up, an attacker could stand up, thousands of nodes and disrupt consensus by overwhelming the network. So to prevent that, we instead have token-weighted voting, where it's one token, one vote. That works very well theoretically, but what you need is that token has to have real value. If the token has no value, then an attacker can just as easily buy up a third of those tokens and disrupt consensus. So you have to have token-weighted voting, but the token actually has to be worth enough that it's prohibitively expensive for an attacker to purchase that third that could jeopardize the network.
Right.
And if you just release the tokens into the market, they may have a high value, they may not. You take a chance.
Right.
And especially if they're volatile, there could be periods of time where they have a low value.
Right.
And that would put the network at risk.
Right. And that's come about with some other networks in the past too.
Certainly, and especially with the regulation uncertainty, with market uncertainty, interest rate uncertainty, we would expect to see volatility going forward. So it's unwise, I think, and we're not comfortable, Lehman particularly is not comfortable releasing a huge amount of the tokens initially because of that risk. So if you don't release them, what do? If you hold them, if we held them ourselves, people would have to trust us.
Right.
And we don't want to be that single point of failure and have the network and the community rely on us, i.e. management, to do the right things with those tokens. It sort of undermines the concept of distributed consensus and a decentralized network. So what we've done, as we've talked about before, is we've created this council.
Yeah.
The council actually controls the Treasury tokens. Treasury is about 64%.
And do you mind if I just pause you right there? So when you say controls the supply, like I guess is that like they directly own it, or like is it control in the sense that they have the ability to direct certain actions on of the supply?
Yes, it is the latter. So of our fixed supply, 64% roughly is in Treasury. The council has custody of those, but they do not have economic interest in them.
Right.
And so what they can do is over time, on a very gradual release schedule, sell those tokens into the market and do so in a way and manage that treasury pool in a way that supports the security of the network overall.
And when you say sell the token supply, it's not one individual member selling the supply, it's the entity itself.
It is Hedera Hashgraph, controlled by the council, selling that treasury pretty much starting in year 4 or 5, gradually selling over time. Mm-hmm. Important thing to realize is we always think about incentives. What are incentives? And everyone in the universe thinks about incentives, especially in the crypto world. And importantly, management doesn't own Treasury, and council members don't own Treasury. So when a token is sold from Treasury, if it's converted into fiat, that fiat sits in Treasury and is only used to either support the business or to protect the network in case of crisis. And so what that means is that no one has a dividend right on that treasury, which also means there's no incentive for fast sales or sales at particular times.
Right.
And instead, what the council wants is to have a very high price of the token, because that will make it more expensive and more difficult for anyone to buy a third of them up. So the council's objective is to have sort of two competing objectives, but one is to have the widest distribution of tokens possible, and also to ensure, which is a protecting mechanism, and also to help the price be both stable and relatively expensive for anyone to buy a third. And so the other objective here is, over time, to have the widest distribution of tokens possible. You do that by a very gradual selling process, which makes it highly unlikely and difficult for any one or several parties to buy up a lot of the tokens, because they're just distributed over a 10 or 15 year period. So this is a very long sales and release schedule that we're planning to implement. And related to that, backing up to the very beginning, given this desire to only have a third of the tokens released by year 5, in year 1, it's going to be in the order of 10% released. We think we've stated the maximum we would release in year 1 is 20%. The current plan is closer to 7 or 10.
Yep.
And then that grows steadily to a third by year 5, with the concept being it's mathematically impossible for someone to disrupt the network. If they can't buy a third of the tokens, there won't be a third available to be purchased until after year 5. And so I think that that is driven by security considerations and wanting to eliminate the class of attack which involves buying up a third of the voting power effectively.
Right. So going back to this concept of like concentration too, I have to ask this because I know it's been a question a lot of people have been asking. So the council itself, right? The council is obviously, holding in custody the majority of the token supply there too. I guess, like, what assurance do people have that that they're not going to do wrong with the tokens?
With the tokens and supply. Listen, and that's a fundamental principle of what we've tried to architect here, and that is why we have worked to find some of the biggest companies in the world, from every region, from Australia, Asia, India, Europe, US, South America, and hopefully soon Africa. So we have companies across many sectors, many industries, so that the chance of collusion is very low. And on top of that, by design and by charter, dividends from the token supply aren't permitted.
So when you say dividend, you mean actual members being able to take tokens out of the Treasury?
Correct. Yeah, not only can members not take dividends in tokens, they can't take dividends out of Treasury in fiat either. That architecture leaves no incentive for misbehavior, because there's no reason for members to want to dump the tokens, because they can't do anything with either the tokens or the fiat to the extent they were to do that. And the fundamental objective of the council is to build and manage the most distributed and most secure network globally. Distributed means you have to have a wide distribution of tokens, and secure means token price has to be relatively stable and of a reasonable value, so that a third can't be purchased, as I've said. So those are the explicit objectives. Anything or any activity that would involve an aggressive sale of Treasury would be explicitly counter to those objectives. Be
countered by like the other members if one member wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It takes 2/3 to be able to sell. I mean, there's a variety of different protections in place to make that very difficult. No members don't own any tokens, so no one member can sell their piece. It is everyone together collectively makes a decision about what is sold under what schedule, and the current schedule has de minimis amount of tokens being sold until year 4 or 5.
Right. So I guess one thing this kind of leads into another question too. So as far as like some of these mechanisms of governance of the council itself, or I guess at what point will we actually get to see some of those governing documents or charters possibly be shared?
Well, I think what's going to be more interesting to the community than the document, although I don't think we'll be worried about sharing that, is the actual members themselves. And so we hope to be able to release the first member names in September. We're working through the final comments to the LLC document now, and have a handful that we think are relatively close to signing, but it always takes longer than you would think.
Yeah, so I guess also on that note too, maybe you're not in a position to share this, but I guess what are some of the reasons why it's taking longer? I mean, I have some ideas on why it's taking a long time. I mean, listen, these are large global enterprises with reputations and legal departments to run through.
Correct. So usually each one of these companies has to first have technology sign off, then tax has to get involved, then legal gets involved, and then sometimes M&A gets involved, and for some it has to go to the board of directors.
Oh.
It's that level of scrutiny that is been applied to this, and it's company by company, so that's not the case for everyone.
Yep.
But that is, but we've had that level of scrutiny on this.
Well, I think that's kind of the only reason I raise that is because I know there's been a lot of questions from people about why you guys have been holding off on the names, but I think anyone has experience working with corporations know that, it can take a long time to go through that, so.
Yeah, and this isn't just joining an alliance or a working group. This isn't joining, a foundation. This is actually governing the network and signing up to be part of a company, and that's a very different type of proposition than paying a monthly fee or an annual fee and being part of an association.
Great. And now also another thing, I was just thinking along the lines of the council members, and then also this discussion over the token supply. We're aware that the council members will also be setting up nodes on the network themselves, right? I know in order to run a node, you're also going to need to have tokens. I guess where will their tokens come from to set up the network?
So council members will, by virtue of being a council member, and this gets a little technical, they will be proxy staked tokens from Treasury. And so Treasury tokens stay in Treasury, but each council member will vote initially with the weight of their proportionate share of the tokens in the Treasury. So it doesn't mean they own them, they can't sell them, they can't touch them, they don't in their wallet.
Right.
But that gives them the weight to provide consensus initially.
Right.
And the reason we have to do that is that, again, 39 members, that distributes it, again, broadly. No one node has more than 2.56%. That distributes it pretty broadly. Our objective is to get that as much more distributed over time, but you got to start somewhere, and that's why we want to be public with these companies. They also have to be trusted from different jurisdictions and different regions and different industries, so that it's clear that they are unlikely to collude. Because if you think about it, the opposite side of it, how else could you start a proof of stake model that people would trust? And if it was just us, Hedera, running 40 nodes, there's nothing distributed about that at all.
Right.
And if we were to just say, okay, instead these 10 people, these 10, you, me, will run nodes, you gotta trust us, and that's a higher bar.
25 nodes?
Yes, exactly. It's a higher bar, and I don't think that would really be as globally trusted. So again, this is an interim step where the objective is to sell, after year 4 or 5, slowly sell Treasury all the way down so that these actual nodes at that point actually have no tokens, and those tokens are widely distributed to the community. There are tens of thousands of nodes operating at that point, and governing members then are participating in consensus only to the extent they've earned or bought tokens, but are just making other governing related decisions. And so this is a, Mance likes to say, it's bootstrapping trust. And it's a way to begin this consensus operation.
Right from the get-go, right?
Right from the get-go, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of questions that had come about when people were first discovering the Hashgraph consensus algorithm was, how do you prevent civil attacks, and how do you prevent, all these security items that come about? But that's hence why you guys are deploying the proof of stake model on the network.
and that's actually why we didn't announce the public ledger earlier, is because as soon as we said it was coin-weighted voting, the first question would be, okay, who's going to own the coins initially?
Right.
Because that's the vulnerability. And so that's actually why we first got an enterprise customer CU Ledger, so we could then go to these to significant corporations, say, look, this works. It's not just a white paper, something real and functioning reference customer, and you have something real to talk about that gives them comfort. They're signing up to a system which actually is functioning and deployed.
Right.
That made it easier to get the governing members, without which I think it'd be impossible to build the level of trust initially that token treasury would be well managed and deployed appropriately.
So Tom, this brings me to my next question, and I guess around all this talks around proof of stake, there's been questions of whether Hedera Hashgraph is delegated proof of stake or DPoS. Between the proxy voting that's taking place on the network, I guess what makes this different from DPoS, and I guess can you just kind of clarify that, because I know it's popped up a couple times in media. Just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Well, I guess, listen, the fact that our council initially has 39 members confuses people easily into thinking that those are the only nodes that will exist and that they are akin to the DPoS nodes of other protocols.
And that 25.
Is right, and so that's a very common and very logical step or leap for people to make. It's entirely not the case. And thinking about DPoS versus us, the concept of DPoS is you limit the number of block producers to increase the speed of the network, and you delegate these nodes, these super nodes, to a very small number of them so they can transact and come to consensus quickly. Our algorithm doesn't rely on a small number of nodes to be fast. We actually want to have as many nodes as possible at scale. And so at scale, our objective is to have tens of thousands of nodes, maybe even hundreds of thousands of nodes globally. And that's the other reason why we want a wide distribution of tokens, is because we don't want nodes, and we're actually setting the architecture and reward system such that nodes will be capped at a certain amount to explicitly incent the standing up of additional nodes. So our goal is to have as many as possible. At the beginning, we can't start off with tens of thousands. We have to start off with a certain number. Those numbers have to be trusted. So we start off with this 39, this council, but we go to sharding and we go to as wide a distribution as soon as we can. And the other important piece is that no one is voting for these 39. I think we've seen that people, are reluctant to participate in some of these voting systems. And so this 39 initially provide consensus with the objective of eliminating their role in consensus over time. And so it's interesting to think about, they start with 39, we end up with tens of thousands. The 39 effectively have the objective of putting themselves out of the consensus business, because we want ultimately to have the whole world be providing consensus and these 39 to have nothing to do with consensus whatsoever. Again, because the hardware requirements running a node with us are so limited, anyone with a wallet, we hope, will be able to run a node. So there might be proxy staking, you certainly can do that, but we hope that's actually not necessary. The only limiting factor is probably be bandwidth. And so right now we require pretty significant bandwidth for the initial members. Over time, not only will bandwidth become cheaper and more available, but there'll probably be shards that do not require the same level of bandwidth. And so we think that personal laptops, home computers, ultimately maybe even phones, again depending on bandwidth and 5G, will be able to serve as nodes. And so that proxy concept won't be nearly as relevant.
Right.
Our consensus algorithm is not constrained by the algorithm, it's constrained by bandwidth.
Yep.
So if we want to be faster, we need bigger pipe. That's it. And so that's why we want to ensure that the initial members have as big of pipes possible so that we are functioning at as most optimally in the beginning.
Makes sense.
And so over time, as we have multiple shards, some might be optimized for bandwidth and speed, some may not be. Becomes perhaps less relevant. We also see the availability and price of bandwidth probably declining over time as well.
So Tom, I know we covered a lot, and obviously really appreciate you being able to kind of share more of these details and kind of clarify some things. I know they've been floating around on the internet, but it's kind of nice to have it in one spot, and especially hear it directly from you. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would kind of like raise, or you want to?
I think we've covered this in some significant detail, and I guess the overarching point I think is that token for us is required for security, and that leads us to have a very slow release schedule, and that also leads that Treasury component to be managed very responsibly by the governing council, and that it's not owned by management or by the council, but it's just custody there, and it's only in the service of Hedera. Those are the key points, and as long as people understand those, I think they have a thorough understanding of what we're up to.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions that will come up over time, but appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.